Hi everybody, my name is Stephen Trascoma and I am a professor of classics at the University of New Hampshire, and in 5 videos I'm going to show you a new way of learning and thinking about Greek accents. It's going to be based on a concept called the Mora, which I'll talk about in a second. This video is going to give you an overview of how Morae work in Greek. And then the next 4 videos are going to show you, each one will be devoted to the fundamental rules. There are 4 of them that will cover the vast majority of accentuation in Greek. And this is designed to completely replace the way that you think about it traditionally and then the way this subject is taught traditionally. So if you know something about Greek, I'm going to ask you to kind of forget what you already know, except for the alphabet, and except for the fact that ancient Greek had a contrast between short and long vowels. And that contrast was one of how long it took to pronounce them. And you cannot time a vowel perfectly across a language because different people speak at different rates at different times. And so linguists have come up with a concept called the mora. And the mora is just a unit of measurement. And basically a short vowel in a language takes 1 mora to say, 1 mora worth of time, and a long vowel contains 2 morae worth of time. In other words, short vowels are unimoraic and long vowels are bimoraic. And in Greek, the vast majority of diphthongs are also bimoraic, but when I and oi are the final letters of a word, when they're the last sounds of a word, I and oi are regularly unimoraic. Not always, but regularly. So I'm going to leave those up there for you because I don't want you to get caught up in remembering what's long and short. But what we're going to do to figure out accentuation is we need to learn to count morae. And in a word like to, which has 1 vowel in it, and that vowel is an omicron, which is always unimoraic, it's always short, that's pretty easy. There is 1 mora. And so I'm putting a little number under there. And as you go through this, you can practice writing numbers under Greek words, but you want to get away from that as much as possible and sort of do this in your head. I promise you the math will be easy because you never need to count past 4. Take an example like das with an eta in it. Etas are always long, always bimoraic. So that has morae 1 and 2. And now you can see that when we count morae, we're counting them from the end of the word. The last mora is mora 1, and then the next one to the left is mora 2, and so on. And you can see here in the word skana, 2 etas, 2 bimoraic vowels. So the last eta at the end of the word has morae 1 and 2. And then the next eta has 3 and 4. Now, I told you never have to count past 4. So in a word like paideo, the omega, always bimoraic, 1 and 2, o diphthong, 3 and 4, and I diphthong has 5 and 6. But we don't care about 5 and 6, and I'll never show you 5 and 6 again. 5 and 6 just are irrelevant to the accentuation of ancient Greek. So like I said, you will never need to count past 4. So now we need to figure out what accent is in Greek. So ancient Greek was a restricted tone language, which is sometimes called a pitch accent language. And that means that it used tonal information as its accent. And lots of languages do that around the world. It's a very common thing. But restricted tone languages don't allow you to use tone freely. You can't assign a bunch of tones to different syllables. Instead, it's at a word level. And what happens is that 1 mora in a Greek word is going to receive higher tone than all of the others. So notice that I said 1 mora receives the higher tone than the others because syllables, which is the way we normally talk about Greek accent, syllables actually aren't being accented directly in Greek. It's morae that are being accented in Greek. It's just that morae are always inside of syllables, because syllables are built around vowels. And so it looks like syllables are being accented, but it's really the morae inside of them. One of them in every word will get the high tone. And let me give you an example, but to do that, we're going to have to talk about the written form of Greek that we use. So there are 3 accent marks in Greek. There's the acute, the circumflex, and the grave. And the acute is used to show when the high tone appears on the only mora of a short vowel, a unimoraic vowel, but it is also used on a bimoraic or long vowel to show you that the high tone is on the rightward mora, the one towards the end of the word. The circumflex accent, by contrast, is used on a long vowel to show you that the high tone is on the left word mora, the one towards the beginning of the word in that vowel. We're not going to talk about the grave today. The grave is a replacement for the acute in certain circumstances, and it's really not relevant to what we need to talk about here. So it's the contrast between acutes and circumflex, which really matter on bimoraic vowels. So what I've done here is given you 3 examples of bimoraic vowels, omega, eta, and the diphthong ow. And I've replaced them with English letters to sort of show you the morae inside of them. So the omega is really made up of 2 O morae. And you will see that the one with the acute accent has the rightward mora with the high tone, the second O, whereas the omega with the circumflex on the right shows you that the leftward mora, the first mora, towards the beginning of the word, is the one carrying the high tone. The same thing for the eta and the same thing for the ow. And with that, you know everything you need to figure out tone, because when you're reading Greek words, the accent marks show you exactly what mora is carrying the high tone. So here are 2 forms of the word country. There's the singular on the top and the plural on the bottom. And that has a long alpha, the one on top, in its last syllable. So there are morae 1 and 2. And then the omega, also bimoraic, has 3 and 4. Now, that acute accent, remember what it does on long vowels. It shows you that the right word mora in that vowel is carrying the high tone. So mora 3 is carrying the high tone in this word. Down below, you'll see chorai, and I is at the end of the word, so it is unimoraic, and there are no other letters following it, so unimoraic. And the omega is still bimoraic because omegas are always bimoraic, so there are 2 and 3. The difference is that that circumflex accent is showing you that it is the leftward mora in the omega, which is carrying the high tone. So top form, rightward mora in the omega, bottom form, leftward in the omega. So because the last 4 morae are the only ones that can carry the high tone in a Greek word, there's a pretty limited set of possibilities in terms of how these accent marks are going to be used. So here you have 4 lines, and on the top line, these are 2 ways in which the tone is being shown as being on mora 1. The one on the left has a long vowel, a bimoraic vowel, the eta. The one on the right, de, has an epsilon, and both of them with their acute accent are showing you that mora 1 is carrying the high tone. Mora 2 is carrying the high tone in both of the words on the second line. The circumflex accent of tas on the left shows you that the leftward mora of the bimoraic vowel is carrying the tone. Logos has a unimoraic vowel that is accented here. So again, the acute just shows you the 1 mora in a unimoraic vowel has the tone. On the third line, you can see that when mora 3 is given the high tone, it's a little bit more complex, but not much more. There are more possibilities, but the accent marks are always a reliable guide to what mora is carrying the high tone, as long as you know your vowels. So as long as you know, for instance here, that the upsilon is long, then you are in a good position to be able to figure out exactly what mora is being accented. And if you didn't know that the upsilon was long, the final form there, lue, with the circumflex, that's going to show you that it has 2 morae, because the circumflex always shows you the leftward mora of a bimoraic vowel. And finally, at the bottom, you see a form. These are going to be relatively rare compared to the others, in which mora 4 is being accented. And again, as long as you know that that epsilon at the end has 1 mora, the o diphthong has 2 and 3, then you know that that accent is showing you that mora 4 is carrying the high tone. So Greek accentuation works on 2 principles. There are 2 underlying kinds of accentuation in ancient Greek. There is recessive accentuation, and if you know anything about accent, again, forget everything you know. I'm going to use this term a little bit differently than we normally do. In recessive accentuation, the tone is going to be assigned from mora, away from mora 1, to the left of mora 1, if it is at all possible. And sometimes it won't be possible, but it usually will be. And it's about tendency. And the tendency of recessive accentuation is to pull the tone away from the final mora of a word. And you'll notice that I'm using the Greek letter mu as an abbreviation for Mora. So mu1 is Mora1. Almost all words in Greek have recessive accentuation, and this is the most common and fundamental kind of accentuation. And our first two rules are going to deal with it, so once you know those, you're actually in really good shape to cover most of Greek. But there is another kind of accentuation in Greek, and again, this is about directionality, and processive accentuation always assigns tone to the last mora of a word. This is just what it is. So recessive accentuation tries to pull it away, not always successfully. We'll talk about how that works, but it tries to pull it away from Mora 1. Processive accentuation just pins that high tone to Mora 1. And this is going to show up in some adverbs, particles, prepositions, other things that are indeclinable, things that don't change endings into different forms. And so you'll just learn this for some words. Some words just are sort of built with processive accentuation. But there's one place in which processive accentuation plays an important role, and this is more common than you might want to deal with at this stage. But you're going to need to know it, and you're going to need to learn it, and you're going to need to be able to get it very early on in your Greek career. I've told you that recessive accentuation tries to pull the tone away from the end of a word, but it's not always successful. And whenever the tone is going to end up in the final syllable, and we'll talk about when that happens, when it's going to end up in the only or the final syllable of a word, and that word is one that uses endings to mark for something called case. These are going to be nouns, adjectives, and pronouns. Those words are going to flip back and forth between recessive and processive accentuation in a predictable way, in a predictable pattern. And we'll have one rule that'll tell us what that pattern is. And in fact, I'm just going to give you a glimpse at what the rules are. Rules 1 and 2 both deal with recessive accentuation. The first one is the basis of recessive accentuation, and that defines the default position of the high tone as Mora 3, unless it is in the same vowel as Mora 2, when it's going to go on Mora 4. The second rule, which we'll go to in a couple of videos from now, is going to talk about how that pulling away from Mora 1 and trying to get on Mora 3 or Mora 4 can be limited, how it may not be possible to do that. And then 3, you already actually know 3. It's the definition of processive accentuation. We're going to assign the high tone to Mora 1. And then rule 4 is going to tell us about that hybrid accentuation that's going to work on nouns, adjectives, and pronouns when the tone is limited to the final syllable. Now, I know that if you already know something about Greek and you've tried to learn accentuation or have learned accentuation, this is going to seem very, very different, and it is. And that's because it gets a little more close to the heart of what's actually happening in ancient Greek. In the end, these 4 rules are going to be able to replace a lot of the other rules that you learned in the traditional method, and it'll be much, much simpler. And if you haven't successfully learned accentuation or you're just coming to the topic, this is going to be a much easier way to figure out how to accent Greek words and also how to read the tonal information from Greek words.